everybody, welcome in. It is the Wrestling Mat. I'm all over the place. I'm aware of that. I appreciate you guys bearing with me here as I've kind of messed with the schedule a bit. For good reason. I promise you that. For good reason. Welcome into the Wrestling Mat here. It's going to be the last show for a bit. For those of you that were here yesterday or may have seen it on our social media, getting married this weekend and going on our honeymoon next weekend. So going to get busy the next couple of days, and then I'll be off on honeymoon next week. So you won't see me for a little bit. I really appreciate everybody's well wishes. Thank you very much. And admittedly, I've adjusted the schedule these last couple of days because we've had a lot of that stuff going on, and it takes precedence. No offense to anybody that's watching, but that is what matters the most in my life right now. So that is what is getting my attention, and I appreciate everybody kind of bearing with me with these schedule changes and stuff like that. We'll be back in rocking and rolling in a couple of Mondays after the show. But for those of you that are members that are here, thank you for being with us from the jump. You're getting this one at 11 a.m. Eastern today, 2 hours earlier than everybody else. And for those that are watching at 1 p.m. Eastern or listening on the Believe Network, thank you. Subscribe where you get your podcasts. Subscribe here to the WrestlingMatchShow.com. And if you want to be here when we do some of these earlier shows, the members only, the Matt member shows, come on over to the WrestlingMatchShow.com and become a member there, starting at just $2.99. And those members today are going to get a little bit more access to me. We're going to be doing a bit of an AMA and some NXT talk as well. So if you have questions as a member here, watching live at 11 a.m. Eastern at WrestlingMatchShow.com, fire them in the chat. Be happy to talk about anything. I'll give you my thoughts on NXT, the Kevin Owens video. Got a little interesting bits of action going on right now around the world of wrestling. So we'll get into some of that stuff today, get into your questions as well. Become a Matt member, like I said, at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. You can get access to me that way and a lot more access to the show here, The Wrestling Mat. And on top of that, you can go to prowrestlingtees.com/thewrestlingmat and you get your Wrestling Mat merch. And if you're a Mat member, you get a discount on Wrestling Mat merch at prowrestlingtees.com/thewrestlingmat. So please go check that out. By the way, if you ever get shirts, I know some of you have, tweet us at WrestlingMat23. Send it to us on Instagram, same handle, or me at the Matt Camp. And we like to show it to the world. So please make sure you do that. And with that being said, Let's get into some of your thoughts, my thoughts, your questions in the chat here. Hello, Dennis. He says, very excited to see how AEW pays off the stories they set up Saturday. Yes. So far. And yeah, stuff like that, anything you want to get into, throw it in the chat. We'll kind of jump off topics that way as I bring in some NXT stuff as well. So far, we know Christian Cage and Jay White has been announced. Jay White kind of on a bit of a revenge tour. Interesting spot to be in. Here he is in a match. Again, a high-profile match, considering Christian is sitting on a title shot, and he's Christian. And this is not a knock on Christian, I don't think has been featured regularly in the main event, even if he is a main event caliber wrestler. I'm just saying, he's not at the tippy top right now, which is not a bad thing because we know the heel faction at the top of the company right now. But it's very much the upper crust of the company. That is who Jay White has gotten now in his first 2 matches back. He beats Hangman. Admittedly, I was a little surprised by that, by at least how clean it was. Happily surprised. And now he's going to have Christian, and it feels like another match that both guys shouldn't be losing. Can Christian afford the loss because he still has the contract? And sure, yes, I guess that's where your thought process goes. But at the same time, Christian, I hated when they would have the Money in the Bank winner lose matches like right before they were going to win the briefcase, and more importantly and more frustratingly, right after they won the briefcase. And the line of thinking, because they did it to Brian Danielson. Daniel Bryan, Brian Danielson. They did it to him. Like, he lost far too much and far too soon after he won the briefcase in Chicago in 2011. And the thought was, well, it's just setting up contenders. It's showing he can be beat. It's like, no, that's not how you build up someone who's going to already cash in somewhat of a cheap way. Like, you got to make them credible. So that's my whole thing. You don't really want Christian to lose when he is holding not a guarantee, but a pretty damn good opportunity to become the world champion. I'm intrigued by the match regardless. It's a good match. There are times when I wonder if Christian is not on in front of the crowd enough. Like, there are times where I wonder if Christian, because of how damn good he is, just by his appearance alone in bigger segments that weren't always, he does a lot of backstages, which are fine. It's almost like I think he deserves more time because he makes better use of his time than most do. I would say that. It could be, he's never going to miss. He's very sharp. He's very impactful. Like, he is such a genius and knows exactly what he's doing and has full control. It's good for structure to have somebody like that featured. Here's the thing though. Here's what I'll come back to. If you're a Jay White believer, and I am, this is encouraging. Hangman, Christian Cage, these are wins that, hey, Jay White got beat up by Billy Gunn a month back, okay? This is not that same direction. This is pointing him up, which is where he should be pointed. And he will make the most of this. I can tell you that. Dennis says, feels like they're trying to kickstart the babyface factory to get competitors up and running for all heel champs. And you have to. You have to. For those that don't know, I started writing an AEW column of sorts. Just kind of my thoughts on storylines, direction of the company, on-screen news, off-screen news, just kind of a notebook. Admittedly, I am trying to model this after the old Ross Report. So I'm writing that for DraftKings on Fridays, and there will be entries this week, so don't worry about that. But I would like to attack probably in next week's article. I'll obviously have written it ahead of time because of what I'm doing, but I want to basically take a look at who should be the babyface factory for Jon Moxley. We know, at least in my mind, the end of that is Darby Allin. Or at least it should be. And I think Orange Cassidy will start. So you got Orange and Darby bookending this thing. Who would you want to heat up for Moxley? Who can be a credible contender, but also you're willing to beat them because he's going to have to beat. You're going to have to let this run for a bit. You have to. You can't do the work you've done in the first month and a half of this group to go to the extremes that you've gone. You're not taking that group down in 2 months or 3 months. Like this is easily into the spring of next year. It has to be. You got to have some hope in there, but they need to control a lot. It's just how it has to be. And look, It's a big story to go there. And you want to see the ratings come back up, and you want to see attendance come back up. Like I said, a chase makes money. A chase gets people interested. A chase gives people a reason to believe. Somebody's got to go on that chase now. Where you got to believe in people that are on the chase. You got to want to see Jon Moxley get knocked off the top of the mountain. They've put every kind of heat they can on that group, every bit of it. And they're not going to be done either, or they shouldn't be. All they promoted for Moxley tonight was Jon Moxley is world champion. No one is safe. That is the absolute correct. I don't want to hear we're going to hear from him. I don't want to know. That's just them telling you the world champ is a dangerous man, and we don't know when he's going to show up. And that's exactly the level of promotion he should get, and not a thing more and not a thing less. Unless he's got a match announced, which is easy, but he should be. I love the idea of be on alert. He doesn't have a scheduled segment on the show. Good. I don't want him to. It should be, I just know he's going to be on the show at some point tonight. And it could be multiple times. And he's going to do whatever the hell he wants. And everybody should be on alert. Jon Moxley is the AEW World Champion. No one is safe. Period. End of sentence. Tune in and find out what happens. And what happens after what they did on Saturday. Good. More of your comments here. Some of you have joined in. City and local, Chris is so good. I miss hearing his insights on the ENC podcast. I don't know where it exists on the internet. That show was so damn good. Two guys I have been extremely lucky, I should say, to have had extensive wrestling conversations with both guys on and off camera. Edge is someone. Here you go. This is what I was hoping this would turn into. Random stories that I forget. So Edge is someone I've always, when he retired the first time, I remember saying to myself, so that was what, WrestleMania 27? Yeah, in Atlanta. They had the match with Del Rio to open the show, and then he was done. So I remember when that happened, and I thought to myself, I said, that might be the first Hall of Famer I watched, and I distinctly remember and was old enough to remember every part of his career. Because I was about to enter my teens, I want to say, when Edge, really started to get going in WWF. And I was like, oh, I remember all of that. I mean, that is the prime of my wrestling fandom. Even if I had been watching since a little kid, I vividly remember the Edge stuff. So when he retired, I remember that hit me more than I thought it would. And then I had heard that he was coming back at the Rumble. And I had no interactions with him or anything like that. And I heard he was coming back at the Rumble in 2020. And I knew we were going. So I was doing the watch along. But the watch along room was literally 3 levels up from the rest of the areas of a backstage, which is not how it typically was. It was typically like, oh, you could walk by and walk in. You had to make an effort to get on an elevator, go 2 floors up. NXT had a whole box in the 2nd floor, and then the watch along was on the 3rd floor. So we were very separate. If we had wrestlers or whoever coming on the show or guests, they had to be brought in specifically up there. So, but we were basically across the hallway from the seats overlooking the show. It was another box. And when he came out, and I knew he was going to be in the Rumble, I just didn't know where. When he came out, I mean, the sound from even across the hallway was so unbelievable. And I'll never forget the look on his face. And I was so happy for him because it was like, holy hell, I didn't think I'd ever get to do this again. That look on his face is one of the most genuine emotions you will ever see in pro wrestling. And I'm saying that about someone who is damn good at those emotions and putting them on as a babyface, as a heel, no matter what. And the look on his face when he comes down the aisle and looks around and gets that back. You saw him get it back in that moment. And it is one of the just great, real moments in pro wrestling history that I don't think gets brought up enough in that way. That it's just, and he said it too. He got it like it had slipped away and he had to let it go. And he was able to get it back. I got to, God, I guess it was later that year or maybe the next year. Well, he got hurt. Maybe when he was hurt, I can't remember. But they had some kind of deal with Xfinity with WWE. And if you were like, and I think it was tied into the whole Peacock thing. And basically, it was an Xfinity exclusive. And if you saw this, let me know, because I don't think a lot of people did. But it was like this Xfinity exclusive live interview I did with him for about 35 to 40 minutes. And we basically just figured out like some of his turning points in his career. And we had people vote on things that they wanted to see. And him and I kind of talked over moments. And I was kind of allowed to say whatever I wanted, as was he. And we talked about Kurt, and we talked about Eddie, which he was so happy to talk about because he said, I don't get to talk about him enough. He doesn't get, I always get to talk about Taker, and he goes, I get to talk about all these great guys, Taker and John, but being able to talk about Eddie, because if you haven't seen this, here's a recommendation while I'm away for the next week and a half. Go search out the Eddie Guerrero Edge feud. Primarily happens over SmackDown. It is excellent. It is another step forward, really, for both guys, if you think about it. But it's a really big step forward for Edge as he's building his way up. That Kurt Angle feud is also worth it watching. Edge's ascension up the ranks, while he has a unfortunately not very good feud with Christian when they initially break up after the King of the Ring stuff. But once he kind of gets away from that and you get into the stuff with Eddie and Kurt, it's really good. So it was cool that I got to talk to him about that. And him and I shared stories about sneakers and things like that. Because I had seen he started wearing a lot of different models of the stuff behind me. And I talked about it. I'm like, what's your sneaker connection? Like, all of a sudden he goes, oh, I always liked wearing them, but I could never afford them growing up. So, even I think he had said like Beth was joking with him, like, you're still wearing all these shoes? And, he said, hey, I when I could afford them, I wanted to have them. So it was cool that I got to start wearing them on television. So that was cool. I got to share that. And then with Christian, once again, connecting back to Edge, if you remember the greatest wrestling match ever, the branding under Edge versus Randy Orton, we did a roundtable on YouTube with some of their greatest rivals. So it was me hosting with Big Show, Mick Foley, Christian. We were supposed to have Jeff Hardy, but his internet was absolute garbage. And it was basically me talking to Big Show, Christian, and Mick Foley. I'm sure it's still on YouTube somewhere. It was during the pandemic, so it didn't get a ton of love. Talking to those three guys in and out of kayfabe about Randy and Edge. That was the match, right? Greatest wrestling match ever was Randy and Edge. And it's such great insight. And I remember like Jay said something and he felt bad about what he said. Like he didn't want to have somebody come across the wrong way. And he had said to me, he's like, hey, can we change this? And I was like, yeah, no problem. Because he said nothing intentionally mean, but people could construe something. He goes, I just don't want to come across like a dick or whatever it was. But if I find that, I will post it today on the Wrestling Mat Twitter. But it's the greatest wrestling match ever, like round table, and it's me, Christian, Big Show, and Mick Foley. That was so cool. So I got to talk to both of those guys and people talking about their podcast. I did Raw Talk and SmackDown Lowdown in the same building where they shot the TV show. Um, it had wrapped up, but people would tell me like that was a very involved show, and they were both very involved in it, which you could kind of see from how inside it was and how much fun they had with it, and who they were able to bring in. But that podcast, City and Local, if you listen to those ENC episodes again on Spotify, you can literally see the shift in wrestling where New Japan was getting all the buzz up until the inception of AEW. Let's see. ENC were both listing dream matches. Fast forward to 2024, they both got in the ring with almost everyone they listed from Japan Ring of Honor today. Crazy. And there's probably more. That's another thing I guess I haven't talked about because he's just been so off the radar. But somewhere, oh man, I got to thinking now. I don't know where Copeland is coming back from the broken leg he got against Black in the cage. But he would be a very interesting person to throw into the mix with all the Moxley stuff. I don't like you think about him as a veteran. He's a believable competitor. He shouldn't be the one to knock Moxley off, but you could see him taking up the cause, probably getting a couple of matches out of it. Once again, I think this can keep going on for a while. So even if he's not ready for 3 or 4 months, that's fine. But it would make sense to have Copeland go after Moxley. Now my question is, and I feel dumb not knowing this off the top of my head, so I'm going to look it up. Have they had a match? Was there any? So Mox would have been gone from WWE by the time Edge was back. Moxley, in this version, against Copeland right now, that's a pretty big star power kind of feud. Mox is on his list. Holy hell. I'll tell you what, and I'm sorry for slowing this down. I just want to see something. Copeland, right? That is a big match to have. They have never wrestled. Thank you, City and Local, for that. Moxley and Edge, Copeland, have never wrestled. I'll be definitely thinking about that more in the coming days. That's a big one. That's a big feud to promote. That is something where it's okay to push into the fact, promotion-wise, that you have two very recognizable names in wrestling that may not be from here. Or may not be, homegrown AEW guys. Which everybody should be over by now anyway, because people switch teams and stuff, all that stuff all the time. Who cares? But that match probably catches a good amount of eyeballs. That catches people that may not watch AEW regularly, but know both of those guys very well. That's something they got in their back pocket whenever Copeland's ready, and no rush or anything like that. And obviously, right now he's been doing fantastic work in the Carolinas area, coming off that hurricane stuff, and continuing to send our best wishes out there. Make sure they're taking a look at what they're doing, because they're doing some great work, making sure people are getting what they need and rebuilding down there, and ways you can help. Dax has had a lot of stuff out there, and they're right in the middle of it. And we're going to see FTR on Dynamite tonight, which is cool. I'm sure they're going to feel a little bit cathartic getting out there tonight. So continued great efforts there. A couple other things here. Let's see what I'm catching up on some questions. We got to see the best of OC during his Moxley feud with the international title. OC made the international title. Made it. 100% he made that title. And it has continued to mean something. And you could absolutely make the argument that is the number 2 championship amongst the men in the company. I think TNT was there. I think it could come back there depending on who has it. But no, I think the international title with Orange Cassidy and, obviously recently more so with MJF and with Will and now with Takeshita, that title's where it should be. But OC put the foundation down for that title. Connor says, most underrated NXT Black and Gold era match. Mine is Sasha versus Becky for Unstoppable. Huge Black and Gold era fan. That is a great match. I hope there's a day where Becky and some of the other names, Mercedes, Bailey, I would love for them to talk about, and I would like this to be a thing individually, wherever they're going to be, to dig into their indie careers and just talk about that. I think they've all mentioned some things here and there. Becky knew Finn, and Mercedes obviously tied back to Amazing Red and training there, and who she was influenced by. And you hear a lot of the, Lita was an inspiration, things like that. But I'm talking about, who they battled on the indies. Bailey's got the stuff she's been doing with Mia Yim, that goes back way before WWE, way, way before. And the amount of people she has already worked with that are now kind of I don't want to say catching up to her, but are now back on the same shows with her. Like Candice LeRae and Mia. God, there's so many. Asuka. They were released in some of the same promotions at the same time. Becky and Paige, Saraya. There is a wild time when they're working Shimmer and some of the all women's promotions. They took there's some of those class pictures they took from those, and it's just a who's who of everybody right now and of the last 5 or 6 years. I'd love to, that would be a fun conversation to have, because as you mentioned, the Becky Sasha match, there is some very clear Zack Sabre Jr. in that match. There's some very clear PWG stealing in that match. And I don't say stealing in a bad way, but influence. Black and Gold era. Let's see. What would be an underrated match? All right. Let me think about this. That Sasha Becky match is fantastic. You get no complaints from me about that one. Ooh. Oh man. I can't. I'm drawing a complete blank here. What is a great match from then? I think Paige Emma's a good one that doesn't get talked about a lot. I think people know it's kind of the first whoa, that's what they got going on down here match with the women. I think that's in the conversation. I got to think about that one more, because I'm sure I'm missing some obvious stuff, because I love that era. I was completely on that. I think I saw NXT in Philly 3 different times. In Upper Darby. It was on a stage. So the stage, all the wrestling happened in front of you. And then everybody, it was like a theater. So everybody was back and up looking down, which is such a different, it was like watching a play almost. The wrestling was just there in front of you on the stage. That was cool. I like that setup. I was at the first takeover. Sasha, Bailey, and Finn and Kevin in the ladder match. I was at the second takeover with Joe and Shinsuke. B. May. Fatal 4 with Sammy Neville, Tyler Breeze, and Tyson Kidd. That's a great match. God, those 4 guys. What a perfect example of mixing in some main roster people with some NXT people. Cesaro going down there and Tyson Kidd going down there. I don't think you can talk enough about how important it was to have those guys there to set the tone, to give people that they obviously had some familiarity with some real good opportunities to set themselves up and lay a foundation for who they're going to be in NXT. Man, it certainly helps when you're looking across the ring at Tyson Kidd or Cesaro. There's a reason Claudio is still so good and can work with literally anyone. I always say him and Sami Zayn is probably my favorite match to show people who are getting into wrestling now. Like, what is a great example of what wrestling has become? Because I say, the most important match I think ever is Bret Hart against Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13. Because I think it's the most important match because of the double turn and what it meant for the business and all that. But that's also not something we see that often anymore. Sami Zayn and Cesaro at that first big takeover show, or whatever it was, Arrival, I think that sets a pretty good example of what wrestling has become since the Attitude Era and since, even the 80s. That's the level of these guys are both really good. It's not about always slowing down and playing to the crowd, even though those guys both know how to do that. Just more of the pacing of what wrestling has become, I think, is perfectly encapsulated in that match. Good question, though. I will look into the black and gold question a bit more. Let's see. Cope implied he should be back shortly. I hope that is the case. I think that would be very good to have him around in this story. Let's talk a little about NXT from last night. First of all, I was severely disappointed in the look of their building. I don't know if Booker T said more than he was supposed to, or he was wrong, or something happened. They basically just created this very dark and now seemingly smaller looking battle arena that's all black and silver. And it just seems like closer in. And the lack of color is just, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. I like the black and silver logo. Don't get me wrong, but they have put that on everything, even the match graphics, not the ones they showed on the show last night, but there were match graphics, I guess, on social media I saw, and everything was black and white. And I don't know if I want my maybe younger skewing show with my up-and-coming talent to be drab. I hated the paint splatter NXT 2.0 stuff. That stunk. That looked like kids wrestling. It was hard to get really, this is a big match. Nickelodeon. That's what I was waiting to hear. So they cleaned it up with the black and white and gold or whatever the hell it was. And then they went to this black and silver, and it's just very built Ford tough. Like, that's what it looks like. It doesn't come across inviting enough to watch. It's just very dark. And the fact that everything pretty much looks the same, I think eh. It was a letdown. I was like, oh, we're right back to what we were doing 3 weeks ago. I'm very surprised that they did that. I'm genuinely, it's not typical. SmackDown changed things up when they, went to USA. Here's new music. Here's new graphics. Okay, absolutely. And NXT did some of that, but, I think Raw will probably look different on January 6th when they go to Netflix. I should really have to, it's bad that I have to add the when they go to Netflix, just because it's saying January 6th. When they go to Netflix, I'll just say that. So anyway, I was disappointed by that. Now, I got to tell you that the match that Stephanie Vaquer and Ren Sinclair had absolutely kicked ass. I don't know if NXT has put on a match like that both competitors benefited from in such a great way. Like, and this will come back to the whole thing that it's developmental. Those two are so far ahead of the majority of people who work down there. And that is not a knock on those people. That's just experience. Ren had been on the indies. Stephanie Vaquer is obviously extremely accomplished already and has worked globally for a while. It's almost not fair to compare them to people who haven't done it for that long. It's not fair to compare them. But man, is it on full display. And I'm not saying it's, well, I'm grading them on a curve, because I'm not. That was about as good of a pace as I have seen in an NXT match in a very long time. What you saw from those two were two people who have done it before and knew what they were doing. There will be times, because it is developmental, and there's nothing wrong with this, where you can see the wheels turning. I'm going to this spot next. And that is just something that comes with time of working and finding your flow and natural movements and connecting your spot to the next spot and transitions. That comes with time. That's like wrestling shorthand of just knowing where to be and how to get there and how to move into things. You get smoother over time. What we watched last night was two people who have all that down. That's just how they work. It's second nature to them. You can't get that unless you just work and have matches and get better. That comes with time. Stephanie Vaquer might be how smooth she looked in that match. All of her stuff looked good. It looked crisp. It was precise. I was thoroughly impressed. And I saw her at Forbidden Door against Mercedes, but she walked into that place and had a match that I'm watching her going, I want to see her versus Asuka. Because Asuka has been, to me, the standard for a long time in the female division. And once again, that's experience. That's where she's worked, how much she's worked, who she's worked with. I don't know if Asuka, she does, I think, from certain people, but like she's the best. She is the best. And I went, oh, I would love to watch Asuka and Stephanie Vaquer. Please give me that match soon. When Asuka's available and up to it and healthy, that will be a hell of a match. So I love that. And Ren Sinclair got so much out of a losing effort, but I went, oh, I want to see more of her. Her stuff looks great. That submission kind of chancery thing she had going on, but she did the spider walk around. Right there. She did that. And I went, and there is now something she can do in every single match that people will pop for. It was awesome. I can't tell you how much I love that. And the Tony D thing was fine. Once again, it was very much, I did it. And I'm like, you're the Don. You're the leader. You should be able to just portraying him as an underdog it felt weird. He broke me. Aren't you a Don? Should you be saying that out loud? That's why Tony Soprano did therapy in private. He didn't want people to know. Make him seem weak. It doesn't. I'm just saying it makes you seem weak. So Tony D'Angelo saying, you broke me. Doesn't that make him seem weak? If he's the Don? People still like him. They're going to have another good match next week, and Oba won't have to get pinned. That's the key. And then he can wing at the end. He is an opportunist. That's what they've established him as, but still very good at it, and they'll have a good street fight next week or at Halloween Havoc and trickle one again, and then maybe Ethan will move on. Maybe. But a couple of rematches there. Not a bad thing to do. And, very typical rematches where the champs will now go over in stip matches and it will work. And they'll move on to the next things. So Oba won't get pinned. It'll lose again. And Ethan will put Trick over. And Trick will win a weapons-ish match. A schmazzy kind of plunder match. That's fine. And Trick will move on to his next opponent. Maybe Ethan will move on to SmackDown. We will see. The Kevin Owens social media video that went up is interesting because he's indicating that there is video footage of the reason he has acted the way he did. You want to talk about social media being currency. He does not use social media. He's paying attention to it, I'm pretty sure, but he does not use it. So when there's a video that pops up on Kevin Owens' Twitter feed, you immediately pay attention. And he even said, maybe I'll have to put it up on here. Right away, I got to pay attention. I got to know what's... And that right there is how you keep people invested and on top of your product on the off days. SmackDown is in 3 days, 2 days. But in between, he said, I wanted this to air on Raw and didn't. So he put this video out here today. You've now hyped up SmackDown in the middle of the week with a fresh piece of content, with a fresh piece of the story. And now, on a day where you don't have a show, people are talking about it. People were talking about it last night. You do it during NXT. It's a topic of conversation during NXT. But it's something that now is in between last Friday SmackDown and this Friday SmackDown that builds the story a little bit more. Those little things go such a long way in keeping people invested and keeping people directed towards your television show. We know you're on Twitter, so let's go find you there and tell part of the story on an off day. And just as useful as a 15-minute segment on TV was Kevin's few minutes on his Twitter. And now we wonder what is in that video footage, which we're going to see Friday on TV or on his Twitter. But we have to wonder. And we're talking about it. And that is excellent writing and a great way to keep your fans engaged. Running those off-day angles. And it's Kevin, so you know it's good anyway. So that's pretty much it, everybody. I'm going to I'm going to go get married this weekend, and then I will be back. I can't say tomorrow. What's the date? What are we doing here? I will be back on October 28th. So in the meantime, go back and watch old episodes. Go back and watch all the clips at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Subscribe if you haven't. Subscribe to the podcast. I believe we have like 31 episodes of that on now. So if you're new to the show, there's another way you can take it in and become a member at thewrestlingmatchshow.com. Go, and by the way, when you become a member, go back and watch members-only videos that you may not have seen before. So, with all that being said, also head over to prowrestlingtees.com/thewrestlingmat. Go buy a shirt. Come hit us up. Thank you, everybody, for being with me. Thank you for giving me a chance to do this and for sticking around, because I'll be back married on October 28th to talk about wrestling even more. Until then, enjoy the wrestling, and I will talk to you guys very soon.